Well, I can think of very few speakers to follow that, but one of them is here, Michael Moss. He's an investigative reporter from New York Times, Pulitzer winner for his dangers of contaminated meat. But the reason is really this book that I made him to sign for my children last night is Sugar Fat, How the Food Giants Hooked Us. So which become number one, fortunately, I mean, talking about the movement, cultural change, and behavioral change, become number one New York Times bestseller, and helped to change the national conversation about food. Michael Moss.
Thank you. And I don't know why I always have to follow somebody like Dan, because the stuff I write about doesn't have butter in it of any persuasion, often no milk of any persuasion. It's got cows, but not cows in pasture and animals that you probably won't even recognize given the effort put into making them bigger and more productive. But I'm also appalled that I'm standing here because I'm feeling a little bit like a groupie because I've spent my career doing two things: talking and typing, and maybe a little bit of sleuthing on the side. But to be in a room with people like you guys who are actually doing real things out there and fascinating things, I'm going to talk really fast here because I want to certainly hear from you and not me. So my hour-long book talk into, I swear, 9 minutes, and we'll zip through it. And there's the book, of course. The bottom line message of the book is that I was incredibly lucky to come across this trove of documents that put me inside the largest food companies in the world as they were formulating and marketing and plotting to sell their products. And the overwhelming message you get from the documents and the interviews in the book is that this is an industry that is driving day and night to get us not just to like their products, but to want more and more of them. They're staffed with consultants like Howard Moskowitz, who recently did this project for a new soda flavor for Dr. Pepper, in which he created the perfect bliss point for sweetness in soda. He, in fact, coined the term the bliss point, and there are similar people creating the perfect amount of flavor burst, as they call it, for salt, and mouthfeel for fat. And while I don't view this industry as this evil empire that intentionally set out to get us overweight or otherwise ill, at least not all of them, they industry that is peopled with companies doing what companies do, which is to make as much money as possible by selling as much product as possible. And they have been, over the years, acutely aware that when they hit the perfect amount of formulas in their products, they will send us over the moon and walk off the shelves. And this is an industry that has been acutely aware of their deep reliance on using huge amounts of salt, sugar, fat to, in many cases, drive overconsumption. And I start the book, and I won't spoil the fun, but with this amazing meeting in 1999 where the heads of the largest food companies in North America have a very private meeting to discuss their culpability in the emerging and growing obesity crisis. And I think you will love the outcome. But this is one of the slides that one of their own, a senior executive, showed to them to try to encourage them to start doing the right thing by people and their health, showing the spread of obesity. Three things are like really struck me as being surprising in the book. And on a personal note, is that how many of the major players in the food giants don't eat their own products. They know better. One of my favorite characters is a former chief technical officer of Kraft, and he used to jog for exercise, and when he blew out his knee, the first thing he did was stop eating many of his company's own products, because he was one of those people who would sit down in the evening with a bag of chips and a martini, and he would eat the entire bag. I knew that so many people are culpable of doing the same or are out of control doing the same thing. And so he cut it out, knowing how powerful the formulas and the ingredients in these products were. The second surprising thing was that and this kind of goes back to the factories of the black spokes, these companies are more hooked on salt, sugar, fat in huge amounts than we are. And they are between a rock and a hard place now as more and more people are demanding that they make their products healthier or at least less bad. They're having a hell of a time dialing back on these huge amounts of salt, sugar, fat. I have a scene in there where I went to Kellogg's and they wanted to impress upon me how difficult it was to reduce the amount of salt products, and they made for me special versions of icons in the store without any salt at all. And I have to say, compared to the dinner last night, it was the most hellish dining experience I ever experienced. Just the Cheez-Its, which I could normally eat day in and out, without salt, we couldn't even swallow them because salt provides texture and solubility. One of my favorite things that the industry struggles with is meat, because is rewarmed, the fat oxidizes and gives us what the industry calls warmed over flavor. Except they often like to pronounce it not waff, but woof, because they describe that flavor as the taste of wet dog hair. And who can guess why canned soup with meat in it tends to be so salty? It's because one of the critical aspects of salt is that it will mask some of the off notes that are inherent and creep into processed foods. The third thing, though, and this is like a real people part of the book, that really surprised me is that how all of these companies have cabals of insiders who are trying to the right thing. And sometimes those insiders leave the companies. And I was just floored by the many people I met and interviewed for the book who have left the companies or are now trying things. I'm sorry about the blurriness, but this is one of the very first pictures of that $1 billion a year icon now called the Lunchables on the assembly line by, eventually acquired by Kraft. The inventor of that actually couldn't even get his own kids to serve the Lunchables to his own grandkids, but he's now working with obese children in an inner city near his home near Minneapolis. I met the inventor of the Rice Krispies treat cereal who taught me about the concept of permission, which is trying to create cereal that has to have crunch, but you want it to evoke some marshmallow texture, and it can't because you can't have it a gooey. All you need is sort of a semblance of flavor or smell that evokes those memories from our childhood of eating Rice Krispie treats, and we, the public, will give them permission to sell us that product. It's an incredibly powerful concept. And one of my favorite characters of all is Jeff Dunn, former CEO of Coca-Cola, North America, South America. I wasn't even going to write about Coke in the book, but he walked me through, because for 20 years he was one of their fiercest warriors in competing with Pepsi for stomach share. He walked me through their pioneering of the supersize me phenomena, the warlike language that they use in their competition with Pepsi, and their targeting of children at corner stores, knowing that when a child walks into a convenience store, his or her spending money and decides for the first time what to buy, they will become brand loyal, imprinted on their brand. So the snack companies up and down the street marketing, which describes their trucks going from one store to another. And Jeffrey Dunn left Coca-Cola, went to work for none other than one of the biggest baby carrot farms in California. But here's the really cool thing that he did. He has started to take some of the strategies that he used Coke to develop supremacy over Pepsi and is applying those to selling vegetables. So I was a little wrong when I said I'd never get a chance to do anything like you guys, because in this one instance I did. I had the bright idea of asking the question, what would my food giants, I apologize for the possessive, do if suddenly they had to start selling what every nutritionist says we should be eating more, which is more vegetables and whole fruits? And it's clear that they would rejigger completely the agricultural system and reverse the ratio of 90 million acres for field corn and 5 million acres for all vegetables and fruits, and turn that on its head to make produce cheaper, more accessible, more convenient for people. But it also occurred to me that they would go to their geniuses on Madison Avenue and demand of them to find those emotional buttons hit for things as boring as celery. And so it took a while, but I found an ad agency that actually works for the big food companies to do a pro bono campaign for me. And not only that, but I talked them into letting me watch the process so we could see their madmen work trying to sell what to them was arguably the hardest thing they ever had to sell. And snippets of the video that we did for it to play for you. Our tech guys are ready. Fantastic.
I do not like broccoli, and I haven't liked it since I was a little kid. And my mother made me eat it. And I'm president of the United States, and I'm not going to eat any more broccoli. Now,
in spite of its well-known health benefits, broccoli is not a popular vegetable. It was derided by President George Bush, and it's pretty much ignored by the rest of us. I'm Michael Moss, and I write about the intersection of food and marketing for the New York Times. I'm trying to answer a question. What would it take to get people to eat better? The advertising firm Victors and Spoils, whose previous clients include Quiznos, General Mills, and Coca-Cola, took on the challenge pro bono.
Okay, so weeks into the process, and you had to love these guys because like one of them came up to me at one point and said, you know, thank you so much, Michael, because I spend all of my days trying to sell stuff that kills people. And you've given me a chance to try to sell something that else. You do some good for people. But halfway through the process, they go, okay, so we're going to start things off easy here, a little social media campaign. We're going to pick a fight with somebody else in the grocery store. And I think, fantastic. They're going to go after my Doritos or Cheetos or French fries. And they go, no, Michael, stay tuned.
Consumer insight that we're working with is that everyone is currently talking about kale. It is everywhere. This is Bon Appetit magazine. There's a whole section on the vegetable revolution in here, and there's a timeline around when all of these vegetables had their it moments. Broccoli is not on this list. There's nothing new or exciting to say about broccoli. Part of our challenge is going to be how to change the visual communication, the visual style of broccoli in culture.
That wall over there says broccoli isn't exactly that cool. But maybe there's something cool in not being cool.
Like, you don't want to dupe anyone, but maybe, maybe they're in on the joke. I mean, the fact that broccoli's having its own campaign, I think you could have a lot of fun with.
The idea of broccoli bouquets. So you're basically saying I'd like you to live longer. Here's something that's going to do that. Since broccoli is probably a better gift than flowers.
Is it a bouquet?
Oh.
Sorry, they got lost. The answer was, is it a brocade? I mean, this is how these people spend their day, right? Sort of having fun. And this is what they came up with, this fictitious campaign. And I thought, oh my God, the kale people me. And then they said to me, Michael, you're forgetting your own book where you wrote about how the great soda war between Coke and Pepsi was in fact this incredibly bloodless thing. Because every time one of the companies went after the other one, sales of both companies rose. And the former chiefs of both companies are famous for saying in some of their tell-all books later that if the other company had existed, they would have invented it for the competition juices that it created for them. And by the way, some students in Yale actually took these posters, put them up in New Haven, one of the biggest food deserts in the country, and lo and behold, broccoli sales went through the roof for their little test campaign. Finally, I was able to sort of spend some time sort of back in the agricultural system, and I ran across some farmers in Illinois who were retraining themselves to no longer grow field for alcohol, livestock feed, and high fructose corn syrup. Fruits and vegetables, because they were discovering that acre for acre you can make tons more money growing vegetables and fruits than you can field corn or soybeans. But the problem is marketing in that case. In southern Illinois, these guys and gals planting fruit trees and vegetable patches have very limited ability to get their stuff to people. And so just one of my favorite experiences was meeting one of these farmers. He worked for none other than Archer Daniels Midland, the biggest high fructose corn syrup maker out there. And he goes, well, okay, I've got these apples. I can actually price them less than the supermarket apples. They're gonna be hugely tastier. Where am I gonna sell them? And he goes, I've got 5,000 people here at the ADM headquarters. And so instant corporate CSA started talking to people in the building of this black smoke factory, if you will, and they're going, absolutely, bring those apples in and we will buy them. And look, it's just a tiny little glimmer of what all of you are up against in trying to sort of market and grow your own companies. But for me, it was very inspirational. And finally, of course, I was on jury duty last week with a company that is growing and growing and growing, and some people say at least partly responsible for the slide in McDonald's sales that we saw last week. But the interesting thing that they're facing is ingredient supply. And the person I was on jury duty with was in charge of their ingredient gathering. And he was saying, you know, it's a real challenge. The more stores we add, the more, you know, challenge it is to sort of finding the kinds of ingredients to make the products that we want to sell. And I have a feeling that some of you here, you know, may have some thoughts and solutions to that. So did I go over? Thank you very much.
You may just want to sit here.